Alright, so I have a lady who is willing to advocate. She is in a different state, but it's a start. She told me the same thing that many other people told me. Things that I already knew before any of this started. Because of my disabilities, I literally need someone to go in with me or nothing is going to happen. And all those people who said I need someone to go in with me or nothing's going to happen, they're actually wrong about that, because there are multiple other options. See, nothing is going to happen. To me, that's blowing me off. But there are other options, like if you're going in to turn in a police officer, them threatening, harassing, or intimidating you. Or even assaulting you. When I said I needed someone to go in with me, every autism advocate that I've spoken with in multiple states, and believe me, I've called a lot of them, they can't take me unless I am in that state in specific and I have to go fill out intake with them. Any of you who have ever been through an intake, it's difficult, but it's not impossible. The problem is you have to get there and you have to get there without being victimized. Without a vehicle, that's difficult. Without money, that's difficult. The problem is without an advocate, it's impossible to get any of this done. Like the one that I spoke with this morning said, because I'm autistic, somebody has to go in with me. I don't know how many times I've said that. I didn't say it because I was talking out my backside. I was saying it from experience. I've dealt with a lot of homeless people and a lot of autistic people that have parents who care, and there's a big difference between the two groups. See, with the homeless, you don't have parents who are going to go in with you. You don't have an advocate who's going to go in with you. If you had someone who cared that much, you wouldn't have ended up homeless to begin with. Advocacy, that's the important part. See, without an advocate, the police aren't going to take a report from me. That's literally not on their agenda. The one time that they pretended to was because I had someone go in with me. But like I said from the start, they're not going to listen to me unless someone goes in with me. There are supposed to be autism outreach groups, and I've called a lot of them. I have not had very many of them return my calls, and very few of the places that actually have returned my calls have been able to help me because of where I was at the time and because of my ability and availability to get to where they want me to go. 3 of the autism advocacy groups that I've spoken with and disability advocacy groups that I've spoken with are in Colorado. Those ones in specific are the ones that I need in order to get help in Colorado. Meanwhile, without their help, everything that happened because I didn't have their help before prevents me from going there to get their help now. A lot of people don't like the way that I act. Well, it's fine for them to act that way, isn't it? Or to act worse over less. As far as the harassment over the internet and the threats against my life and the assaults, it's difficult to. It's not difficult to show the evidence that is saved on the internet. It's not difficult to show that at all. It's difficult to get someone to take a look at it. But then there's the situations like the assaults. The assaults happened in areas where the police outright denied me my human rights. So I have to be afraid to go to the police if I'm assaulted. That's actually been over 10 years worth of that. Over a decade worth of that. That's something I've had to be afraid of since I first became homeless. The first time I was homeless, I was 18 years old. I got dropped off in Chapel, Nebraska with one shoe, a pair of socks, a pair of pants, a belt, and a t-shirt. That's what I had. And if it weren't for Ron and Terry and Kim and little Jason Jepson allowing me to stay in their garage up in the loft, it was basically just some boards strung across some rafters with a piece of carpet on it. If I'd have rolled too far to the left or to the right, I'd have rolled right off of the thing onto the cement floor. But you know what? It was a roof over my head. If it hadn't been for Janet Roberts, that's Jamie Curtis's grandmother, putting me to work because she already had an ID on record, I wouldn't have been able to get a job because I didn't have ID. I didn't have anything, no driver's license, nothing. And that's the reason that I was able to feed myself in part and feed my family, my little brother and little sister in specific in part. I used to get groceries and sneak into my mom's old house, put it in the fridge and leave. I'm doing the best I can, but people not understanding is not my fault. It's not my choice. It's not my decision. People like Lanny Engeline thinking that she can punish me into being normal. Well, that's never worked. You treat me decent, I treat you decent. You gang up on me, I'm going to have an issue and I'm going to speak out about it. It's all I can do. See, I may not have a voice. Just like when I was a kid, I didn't have a voice. All the people that needed to hear it were deaf. They say when you're being bullied, go to an authority figure. Go to your parents. Well, my parents weren't there to go to. Go to a teacher. Well, the teachers blow you off if your parents aren't there to give a shit. You go to the police, they blow you off unless your parents are there to give a shit. And where were my parents? My dad was in prison and my mother was in rehab. So they got to do whatever they wanted to me. Without an advocate, this is, well, about as close to impossible as it can get without being completely impossible. It's just highly improbable. A lot of the things that I've had to do are against the law, but then again, I tried to do it the legal way, and the legal way didn't work. There's always some excuse why these people can't do their jobs. A lot of times you don't even get to hear their excuses. Like Pamela Cardi and her entire office, the public pretender's office of Arapahoe County, not doing anything at all, including answering or returning phone calls. All right, they did answer, the receptionist did, and she transferred me to a number that I left my number and I left my contact information, and still haven't gotten a reply. There's hundreds of places that I have to call to coordinate with all the crap that I've been through, and I get easily overwhelmed. With all of those numbers that I gotta call, it takes time, and I can't call the same place over and over and over again every single day. I have other things that I have to do in order to take care of myself, in order to take care of my obligations to other people for the help that they've offered. Maybe they'll keep their word and maybe they won't, but if I don't do what it is that I said first, they have no reason to fulfill their end of the bargain. And if I fulfill my end of the bargain and they don't keep their word, well, y'all know what I'll do. I'll get on the internet and I'll talk about it. I seem calm and collective right now, but really I'm exhausted mentally. I don't know how to explain to you what it's like to be in this state of mind, to know what's going on and to be powerless to do anything about it. To know what it is that I need physically and mentally and emotionally and financially, and to be too shut down to be able to do that, and every day gets worse. If you are the parent of an autistic child, you need to prepare your child for the world, yes, but you also need to be an advocate, not just in court, not just at your school, but an advocate out publicly, letting people know. If you're one of the people who has a child who's severely autistic and is violent and bites and scratches and kicks, you know that child, and you should, as a parent, know that child's triggers, and you can educate people about that. If you have mild autism, or if your child has mild autism and they're highly intelligent, you still need to learn about things that you may only think in your head that people who are severely autistic have to deal with. Sensory overload, that's something that you don't have to be autistic to go through. You can have PTSD and go through that. A lot of folks have tried telling me that I can't have PTSD because I was never a soldier, or because I was never in the military. Well, you can get PTSD from a combat zone. You can also get it from sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect, from being assaulted repeatedly. PTSD and autism are not the only conditions that come with that, though. It's not. A lot of the things that are commonly associated with autism are also commonly associated with PTSD. Their commonality is so close that it's difficult for many doctors in those fields to tell the difference. A lot of the same things that you have to deal with an autistic child, you also have to deal with a child who's been through a lot of sexual abuse, a lot of physical abuse, or a lot of neglect. You need to go in with them. When they make a police report, If they need to talk to the police, you need to go with them. You need to be there in the room to give your full support. If the officer is doing something that is going to trigger your child, then you need to be able to inform that officer that what they're doing is destructive. If that officer wants to argue, you can try to explain to him why. But really, your best bet at that point is to take them to court. If your child is at risk, and they're put further at risk because these authority figures we're all taught to go to. We're all taught to go to the police, aren't we? We're all taught to go to the teachers, aren't we? We're all taught to go to our parents, aren't we? Sometimes that does more harm than good. And in the cases where it does more harm than good, it's usually because that person had to go in by themselves. And when you're having sensory processing issues, that is the wrong time to go in and talk to the police. Having someone there with you who you know is on your side, who you know is not going to leave in the middle of it and go have to have a drink or smoke a light bulb or put a needle in their arm. That's why we're supposed to have these trained advocacy groups, and there are a lot of them. I've called a lot of them. But much like with the police, you need an advocate to get started with any of that. They're not going to listen to you. They can't. In most of the states in the Union, it's illegal for them to take a report from somebody like me without somebody else present, without an advocate present. Specifically. Now, that advocate could be a parent or guardian. That advocate could be specifically from an advocacy group, like Colorado Cross Disability Coalition. I didn't want to do any of the things that I had to do because police wouldn't take my report. Those aren't things that I wanted to do. I didn't want to go public with any of this, but the fact is I was being assaulted in public. I was having my life threatened in public. This is before Natalie died. I had to deal with this in public. And after she died, the news painted it all sorts of public. And the public came at me harder and pretended it's all right. I need housing. I need placement. At the same time, I am wholeheartedly willing to spend the rest of my life in prison just to expose how screwed up the United States is. How messed up the laws are and how easy it is to victimize the most victimized people in America. Foster children and former foster children. People who don't have an advocate, a brother, a sister, an aunt, an uncle, or even a next door neighbor. Anybody can be your advocate. They just have to understand you, and they have to understand the situation. I had to try to advocate for myself the best I could when I went in December 29th of 2017 to go speak to Detective Hyatt, of Broomfield, Detective Jai Rogers, and Detective Mark Peterson of Adams County. I had to try to explain to them what my triggers are so that they wouldn't do those things. Kayla Trujillo explained to them what my triggers were so they wouldn't do those things. With an advocate there, they don't do those things. You tell them what triggers you, and they don't. They don't do those things because they want to get the best information out of you as possible, and they also don't want to get in trouble for intentionally triggering you. But when there's nobody else there, they can do whatever the hell they want.